Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back thousands of years, into that shimmering heat where sand stretches beyond the horizon and stone temples loom like frozen giants. You're standing there, squinting beneath a golden sun that seems intent on melting every thought out of your head, and you realize you're about to stroll right into the private lives of the pharaohs. Not their wars, not their taxes, not their monumental architecture. No, tonight, it's the softer, messier, and surprisingly funny side of power, how pharaohs flirted with foreign princesses. And honestly, if you had to navigate ancient royal dating apps, except the swipe right was a 400-mile diplomatic caravan, you'd probably give up after day 2. You'd be like, yeah, no thanks, I'll just stay single. You probably wouldn't survive out there, trust me. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop me a quick comment, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? I love seeing the mix of cozy living rooms and sleepy time zones. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander into the Palace of Egypt, the air thick with incense that stings your nose in a way not unlike walking past the perfume aisle at the mall, except here it's blended with the faint tang of Nile mud clinging to the sandals of servants. Marble columns rise around you, painted in reds and blues that have somehow clung to life for centuries, and in the middle of this orchestrated grandeur sits a young pharaoh, barely more than a teenager, but already draped in the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. His job? Ruling millions. His secret mission? Figuring out how to woo a foreign princess without making Egypt look desperate. Because here's the thing, when you're a pharaoh, flirting isn't just about batting your eyes across a banquet table. Every smile, every gift, every awkwardly phrased letter carries the weight of international politics. It's like being on a first date, while also negotiating a trade deal worth half your GDP. Imagine trying to crack a joke while making sure your country still gets those sweet shipments of cedarwood. No pressure, right? In this opening stretch, you see Egypt opening itself like a grand window to the world. Envoys march in from Babylon, Mitanni, and the Hittite Empire, sweating under the weight of gifts stacked so high they wobble like a Jenga tower. Gold jewelry, lapis lazuli beads, ivory combs, each item a subtle whisper, please, accept this and maybe consider marrying my daughter. And there you stand, watching as the pharaoh nods, all calm composure, though inside he's probably rehearsing lines like some nervous teenager at prom. And here's the funny part. Those foreign kings didn't exactly send Tinder profiles with flattering portraits. No, they sent letters carved into clay tablets. Thick, rectangular chunks of mud with wedge-shaped script pressed in so tight it looks like a cat had a seizure in a litter box. These tablets arrived in wooden crates, and someone had to sit there and translate them for the pharaoh. Picture it, you're the ruler of the most powerful kingdom on earth, but you can't even read the love letters in your inbox without a middleman. Talk about ruining the vibe. Still, those messages weren't all serious. Hidden among the stiff diplomatic language, you can sense a kind of coyness, promises of beauty, hints at shared prosperity, and sometimes veiled jokes about dowries. The pharaohs loved it, because beyond the jewels and trade deals, these were glimpses of personalities, flirtations cloaked in cuneiform. As you shuffle closer, you catch whispers that aren't written down, courtiers gossiping about which princess might arrive, speculating about her hair, her clothes, even her accent. The palace hums with anticipation like a modern wedding expo, except with more jackals carved into the decor. And you realize the window of Egypt isn't just architecture, it's a metaphor. Each foreign bride is like a pane of stained glass, adding a new color to the mosaic of Egyptian court life. And then, in the midst of all this grandeur, a small truth tugs at your sleeve. Many of those marriages never happened. The pharaohs were famously picky, or perhaps too proud. Egypt had a rule: foreign princesses could come in, but Egyptian princesses almost never went out. Imagine the royal dating app again. Pharaoh swipes right a lot, but never lets anyone swipe right on his sisters. It's like playing Monopoly but refusing to trade railroads. It's technically allowed, but it makes everyone else grumble. And historians still debate whether that stubborn rule kept Egypt strong or just made them a little too smug for their own good. For now, though, you linger in this grand opening, where the air is heavy with both incense and possibility. You see the flicker of torches bouncing across polished stone, hear sandals scuffing against the floor, and notice the smirk curling at the edge of the young ruler's lips as he considers which clay tablet might contain more than just trade talk. Because when Egypt opened its windows, the breeze that drifted in carried not just politics, but the promise of whispered affections across deserts and seas. You trail behind the scribes now, listening to the clatter of their reed pens against papyrus. They copy every incoming clay tablet into Egyptian script, which feels almost like today's group chat screenshotting every DM for the squad. The pharaoh, reclining on his lion-footed chair, pretends to be disinterested. But you see the twitch of his foot, the way his hand taps on the armrest. He's waiting for the juicy part, the line that will either make him chuckle or roll his eyes. The letter being read aloud tonight comes from a king of Mitanni, a land so far away that caravans had to trudge across desert and mountain just to deliver a single clay rectangle. The words are both stiff and sly. I send to you my daughter, as radiant as the moon, with gold ornaments befitting her station. You can almost hear the subtext, please, Pharaoh, don't crush us in battle, just marry into us instead. And that, right there, is the heart of the matter, royal romance doubled as national security. Now, if you lean closer, you'll hear an odd little detail that doesn't make the school textbooks. The Mitanni king once sent not just a daughter, but a whole entourage of fake sisters and aunts along with her, basically a cheerleading squad of noblewomen, just in case Pharaoh wanted variety. Imagine receiving a package deal of princess plus her cousins, all dressed in imported linen and wearing perfume so thick it could knock over a donkey. That's not just politics. That's ancient speed dating, deluxe edition. The pharaoh smiles, but he doesn't answer right away. He has a trick: let them sweat. If he responds too quickly, it looks like desperation. If he waits too long, they might send gifts to the Hittites instead. So he paces the palace, drumming his fingers along the columns painted with lotus flowers, trying to strike the perfect balance. You know that feeling when you stare at your phone after a message and think, should I text back now, or wait an hour? Yeah, same energy, except the stakes here are camels, trade routes, and bronze weapons. And oh, the palace itself conspires to heighten this drama. Torches hiss as they consume resin-soaked reeds, shadows flicker across the mural of Osiris judging souls. The scent of roasted goose wafts in from the kitchens, mingling with frankincense until you feel your stomach churn with both hunger and nerves. A group of musicians strums harps in the courtyard, plucking melodies that sound halfway between lullaby and warning. You stand there, shivering though the air is warm, caught in the hum of anticipation. Historians still argue over these letters. Were they genuine attempts at romance, or just transactions dressed in poetry? Some scholars insist the kings truly hoped their daughters would become beloved queens, wielding influence at Pharaoh's side. Others say it was all theater, no more heartfelt than a wedding cake topper. The truth probably wove itself somewhere between. Genuine affection sometimes sprouted in soil of cold diplomacy, and sometimes it wilted the moment politics shifted. But here's a little joke from the ancient record. One pharaoh reportedly complained in a reply that the gifts sent with the princess were not enough gold. Imagine ghosting someone because their dowry package didn't include enough bling. It's like saying, "Hey, thanks for the PlayStation, but where's the second controller?" It makes you chuckle, yet you also realize how deeply material all this affection could be. As you continue walking, sandals scraping the cool stone, you notice guards posted at every doorway. Their spears gleam in torchlight, their eyes sharp as hawks. Because bringing in a foreign princess wasn't just a love story, it was a security risk. What if she carried daggers? What if her servants whispered espionage? Each arrival was a gamble, part romance novel, part spy thriller. You feel the tension coil in your shoulders, the sense that even the act of smiling across a banquet table could tilt empires. The pharaoh finally dictates his response. His voice is calm, but there's a sly curve to his words. "Egypt welcomes your daughter. Send her swiftly, and let her walk beneath the sun of Ari." The scribe scratches it down in elegant hieroglyphs, little owls and reeds and zigzag lines curling across the papyrus. He adds flourishes, because a king's love letter cannot look plain. Then the wax seal is pressed, the document folded, and a messenger prepares for another long, dusty journey. And you, still standing nearby, realize this is only the opening note in a symphony of flirtation. Egypt's windows are wide open, the air rushing with scents of foreign lands, and the game has just begun. The pharaoh knows the world is watching, each princess a chance to paint his reign in brighter colors, each marriage a thread tying nations together. And beneath the politics, you catch it, a flicker of excitement, maybe even hope, that out there, hidden in another court, someone might truly understand him, not just as pharaoh, but as a man. You trail behind the scribes now, listening to the clatter of their reed pens against papyrus. They copy every incoming clay tablet into Egyptian script, which feels almost like today's group chat screenshotting every DM for the squad. The pharaoh, reclining on his lion-footed chair, pretends to be disinterested. But you see the twitch of his foot, the way his hand taps on the armrest. He's waiting for the juicy part, the line that will either make him chuckle or roll his eyes. The letter being read aloud tonight comes from a king of Mitanni, a land so far away that caravans had to trudge across desert and mountain just to deliver a single clay rectangle. The words are both stiff and sly. "I send to you my daughter, as radiant as the moon, with gold ornaments befitting her station." You can almost hear the subtext, "Please, Pharaoh, don't crush us in battle, just marry into us instead." And that, right there, is the heart of the matter, royal romance doubled as national security. Now, if you lean closer, you'll hear an odd little detail that doesn't make the school textbooks. The Mitanni king once sent not just a daughter, but a whole entourage of fake sisters and aunts along with her, basically a cheerleading squad of noblewomen, just in case Pharaoh wanted variety. Imagine receiving a package deal of princess plus her cousins, all dressed in imported linen and wearing perfume so thick it could knock over a donkey. That's not just politics. That's ancient speed dating, deluxe edition. The pharaoh smiles, but he doesn't answer right away. He has a trick: let them sweat. If he responds too quickly, it looks like desperation. If he waits too long, they might send gifts to the Hittites instead. So he paces the palace, drumming his fingers along the columns painted with lotus flowers, trying to strike the perfect balance. You know that feeling when you stare at your phone after a message and think, should I text back now, or wait an hour? Yeah, same energy, except the stakes here are camels, trade routes, and bronze weapons. And oh, the palace itself conspires to heighten this drama. Torches hiss as they consume resin-soaked reeds. Shadows flicker across the mural of Osiris judging souls. The scent of roasted goose wafts in from the kitchens, mingling with frankincense until you feel your stomach churn with both hunger and nerves. A group of musicians strums harps in the courtyard, plucking melodies that sound halfway between lullaby and warning. You stand there, shivering though the air is warm, caught in the hum of anticipation. Historians still argue over these letters. Were they genuine attempts at romance, or just transactions dressed in poetry? Some scholars insist the kings truly hoped their daughters would become beloved queens, wielding influence at Pharaoh's side. Others say it was all theater, no more heartfelt than a wedding cake topper. The truth probably wove itself somewhere between. Genuine affection sometimes sprouted in soil of cold diplomacy, and sometimes it wilted the moment politics shifted. But here's a little joke from the ancient record. One pharaoh reportedly complained in a reply that the gifts sent with the princess were not enough gold. Imagine ghosting someone because their dowry package didn't include enough bling. It's like saying, "Hey, thanks for the PlayStation, but where's the second controller?" It makes you chuckle, yet you also realize how deeply material all this affection could be. As you continue walking, sandals scraping the cool stone, you notice guards posted at every doorway. Their spears gleam in torchlight, their eyes sharp as hawks. Because bringing in a foreign princess wasn't just a love story, it was a security risk. What if she carried daggers? What if her servants whispered espionage? Each arrival was a gamble, part romance novel, part spy thriller. You feel the tension coil in your shoulders, the sense that even the act of smiling across a banquet table could tilt empires. The pharaoh finally dictates his response. His voice is calm, but there's a sly curve to his words. Egypt welcomes your daughter. Send her swiftly, and let her walk beneath the sun of Ari. The scribe scratches it down in elegant hieroglyphs, little owls and reeds and zigzag lines curling across the papyrus. He adds flourishes, because a king's love letter cannot look plain. Then the wax seal is pressed, the document folded, and a messenger prepares for another long, dusty journey. And you, still standing nearby, realize this is only the opening note in a symphony of flirtation. Egypt's windows are wide open, the air rushing with scents of foreign lands, and the game has just begun. The pharaoh knows the world is watching, each princess a chance to paint his reign in brighter colors, each marriage a thread tying nations together. And beneath the politics, you catch it, a flicker of excitement, maybe even hope, that out there, hidden in another court, someone might truly understand him, not just as pharaoh, but as a man. You find yourself back in that echoing hall, where the torches spit resin smoke and shadows lean against the painted walls. But this time, your gaze is fixed not on the young pharaoh but on the stacks of clay tablets that cluttered the scribe's desk. Thick, awkward slabs of earth, hardly the stuff of romance, yet within them lies the heartbeat of international diplomacy, and sometimes, if you squint hard enough, a little flirtation too. The scribes call them the Amarna letters. You run your fingers across the faint ridges, each wedge-shaped impression still sharp after all these centuries. It feels gritty, like the grooves of an old vinyl record. But instead of music, these marks preserve the whispers of kings, pleas of princes, and yes, even hints of affection between rulers and their daughters. You can almost imagine the royal postman trudging across deserts with a backpack full of what looks like construction rubble, muttering to himself, "Couldn't they just invent envelopes already?" Tonight, one of these letters is being read aloud to the Pharaoh. You lean closer, straining to catch the cadence. "Great King of Egypt," it begins, "I send my daughter, with golden ornaments, with lapis from my mountains, and with greetings from my gods to yours." It's the official script, the kind that's meant to be diplomatic. But then the reader pauses, squinting. The line that follows is unusual, a half-joking complaint that the Egyptians never send daughters in return. You can feel the room stiffen. The courtiers shuffle their feet. It's like that awkward moment when someone brings up a family secret at Thanksgiving. Because here's the truth, Egypt had a policy, almost an obsession. Pharaohs married foreign brides, but they never gave away their own daughters. Not once. Other kings begged, pleaded, even threatened, but the answer was always no. Why? Some historians argue it was pride. Egypt saw itself as superior, above sending royal blood abroad. Others think it was strategic, a way to keep the divine lineage tightly controlled. Still others suggest it was simple paranoia. Whatever the reason, it gave Egypt a reputation as the stingiest player in the ancient marriage market. You chuckle quietly, because one Babylonian king actually wrote back in frustration. "You are the sun, yet you never shine upon me with your daughters." That's basically the ancient equivalent of saying, "Come on, man, share a little." The Pharaoh, however, didn't budge. He smiled, he sent gifts, but his sisters stayed firmly at home. And yet the letters show something else too, something tender. One tablet describes a foreign princess sending not just herself but small figurines carved in her homeland style. Little clay charms, tucked in with her dowry, as if to whisper across the miles, "This is me, this is where I come from." You imagine the Pharaoh holding one in his hand, tracing its edges by lamplight, and maybe, for a brief second, feeling something more than political calculation. The scribes gossip about another letter, one from a king who tried far too hard. He listed every single item in his dowry: gold cups, ivory boxes, linen robes, horses, even a chariot painted with scenes of hunting lions. The letter drones on like a medieval shopping list, until one weary scribe doodled in the margin. Historians still debate whether the doodle was an ibis or just a bored hand slipping, but you can't help laughing at the thought. Even in the royal court, someone couldn't resist sketching while stuck transcribing a long message. And here's a stranger detail still. One tablet reveals a pharaoh demanding medical reports about his bride-to-be. Was she healthy? Did she walk gracefully? Could she bear children? It's a chilling reminder that love wasn't always the priority. Fertility was. You can picture the messengers stumbling, unsure how to phrase such intrusive questions without offending anyone. Ancient dating really was HR paperwork in disguise. But even through the formality, the humanity seeps out. A few letters hint at impatience. "Why have you delayed sending her? My court waits." You sense a kind of longing there, a mixture of politics and genuine desire. Was the Pharaoh truly eager to meet her, or was he just anxious to secure an alliance before his rivals did? That's the question scholars still circle, the debate that refuses to rest. You step away from the tablets now, the grit still under your nails, and you realize how extraordinary it is. Entire empires balancing on words baked into mud. Love, longing, anger, and humor, captured not on delicate paper, but on lumps of clay that could survive thousands of years. No parchment rotted, no ink faded. Just stubborn earth holding stubborn secrets. And as the night deepens, you smile? Because somewhere in those rows of tablets, amid the stiff greetings and rigid formalities, lies the first true spark of what might be called flirting. Not the flutter of eyelashes or stolen glances, but the careful, sly insertion of affection into the most bureaucratic of exchanges. You can almost hear the chuckle of a king as he adds a playful line, knowing it will make the mighty Pharaoh squirm just a little. And that's where you leave it tonight, the hall full of clay letters, the Pharaoh's face unreadable in the torchlight, and the slow realization that romance in Egypt didn't start with roses or candlelight. It started with mud. The scribes roll up the papyrus copies now, tying them neatly with strips of linen, while the clay originals are stacked in heavy baskets. You hear the scrape of stone lids as the tablets are tucked away in storerooms that smell of dust and cedar oil. The whole scene has a strangely modern vibe, like watching librarians file away top-secret love letters in the basement vault. Only these vaults are guarded by jackal-headed statues glaring down at you with blank, eternal eyes. You pause for a moment and feel the sheer weight of it, dozens upon dozens of tablets, each a conversation frozen in time. Kings who are long dead, princesses whose names were barely recorded, their hopes and doubts still echo across the centuries in wedge-shaped lines. It's humbling, and a little funny, because so much emotion, anger, affection, longing, was crammed into something that looks suspiciously like a paving stone. You wonder if future generations will ever look at our text messages with the same reverence, or if they'll just laugh at our emoji choices. A guard shifts at the door, and you hear him muttering under his breath about how dull these letters sound. To him, they're just political noise. But you know better. You've seen the lines where kings tease each other about gold shipments, where queens hint at beauty beyond compare, where courtiers slip in comments about timing. These aren't just treaties. They're the closest thing to flirting the ancient world had on record. And then comes one last gem, read aloud almost grudgingly by the scribe. A Hittite king writes, half proud and half sarcastic, that his daughter is so radiant she will make the Nile shine brighter. You stifle a laugh, because, really, that's the kind of line you'd expect from a bad dating profile today. She'll light up your life, swipe right. You glance at the Pharaoh, who arches an eyebrow and says nothing, though you can tell he's amused. The room relaxes, courtiers chuckle, and the tension fades just a little. It's in that moment you understand, the Amarna letters weren't just political correspondence. They were stage scripts, with each ruler performing a role, tossing compliments like juggling balls, slipping in sarcasm when bold enough. And Egypt, sitting at the center of it all, chose carefully which compliments to catch and which to let crash to the floor. As the torches burn lower, you step back into the courtyard. The night air tastes of cool stone and lotus, the stars wheeling slowly overhead. You close your eyes and imagine the messengers trudging away into the desert with another reply tucked under their arms, carrying Egypt's words back across dunes and rivers, to be baked once more into clay. The cycle continues, the flirtation stretches on, and the Pharaoh waits for the day when letters turn into living brides. And so, with the faint hum of insects and the creak of palm fronds above you, you let the image settle, a palace library full of clay love notes, more enduring than paper, less delicate than whispers, but still, at their heart, soft, human, and fleeting. The palace grows brighter again, the smell of incense shifting to something richer, sweeter, like honey warmed over coals. You follow the procession into a storeroom that looks more like a treasure chest cracked open. Here, the game of flirtation changes form. Words scratched in clay may hint at affection, but now the flirting comes wrapped in silk, hammered into gold, and wheeled in on chariots polished to a blinding sheen. Because when pharaohs and foreign kings wanted to whisper sweet nothings, they often did it with gifts. You walk among the offerings stacked high against the walls. The first catches your eye: heavy necklaces of gold, links thick enough to double as anchor chains. They glitter in torchlight, throwing sparks across the polished floor. To you, it feels absurd, like trying to impress someone today by gifting them an entire armored truck full of Rolex watches. Subtlety was not on the menu. The scribes record every item carefully: rings set with lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, ivory boxes carved with delicate scenes of dancers, goblets polished until they gleam like small suns. Each piece is a message: look how wealthy we are. Look how generous. Look how much we want this marriage. The pharaoh doesn't just see trinkets, he sees empires flexing their muscles. And then come the horses. Sleek, tall creatures brought from Mitanni, their manes braided, hooves polished with oil. They snort and stomp, tossing their heads, the sound echoing like drums. To the Egyptians, who once relied more on donkeys, these horses were exotic, almost magical. They weren't just animals, they were the Pharaohs of the Bronze Age. A foreign princess arriving with a stable of them was basically saying, "I come with horsepower," literally. But nothing quite steals the scene like the chariots. One rolls forward, its wooden frame inlaid with silver, the wheels bound in bronze, the leather reins dyed crimson. The courtiers gasp, you hear whispers ripple down the hall. Chariots weren't just transportation, they were declarations. If jewelry said, "I adore you," then a chariot said, "Marry me and also prepare to crush our enemies in style." Among the pile of treasures lies something stranger: jars of fragrant oil. You pry one open, inhaling a sharp scent that pricks your nose like pepper. This, you realize, was more than perfume. It was medicine, incense for temples, even a kind of magical protection. Imagine gifting your crush a bottle of essential oils today but insisting it can heal wounds, banish demons, and keep mosquitoes away. You'd laugh, but in Egypt, this was serious business. Still, there's comedy woven in. One letter, read with some embarrassment by a court scribe, shows a foreign king complaining that the gold he received from Egypt was not real gold, but wood covered in gold leaf. Imagine the disappointment, expecting Fort Knox and getting IKEA with a spray paint finish. It's one of those moments that makes you realize how ancient flirtation wasn't always smooth. Sometimes, the grand gestures backfired. And here's a fact many forget: gifts didn't always come from kings alone. Sometimes princesses themselves sent little tokens ahead of their journey. A spindle wrapped in dyed thread. A carved comb made from bone. Tiny, personal items that spoke of daily life far away. To the pharaoh, these were perhaps more precious than all the bullion, evidence of a woman who was real, not just a political name on a clay tablet. You picture him holding one of those trinkets in the quiet of night, perhaps even smiling at its simplicity. Historians still argue about how genuine these exchanges were. Were the gifts heartfelt, or were they just bargaining chips in elaborate negotiations? Some say the pharaohs valued the items only as signs of loyalty. Others suggest the little, personal touches meant something deeper, slipping past the rigid machinery of politics. And maybe in the middle of all that glitter, there was indeed a flicker of sincerity, an unspoken "I thought of you while choosing this." You step back as servants shuffle past, arms straining beneath gold vessels and bundles of fine linen. The room vibrates with energy, the murmur of inventory mixed with the occasional clink of metal against stone. It feels overwhelming, and yet strangely tender too. Because in this avalanche of treasure you sense the truth. When ancient rulers flirted, they flirted with kingdoms, not individuals. The gifts were declarations to whole nations, yet somehow, they still carried whispers meant for a single person. And as the last chariot wheel squeaks into position, you feel the mood shift. The pharaoh, seated high above the throne, gazes down at the glittering mountain of offerings. His smile is faint, inscrutable, but you catch a glint in his eye. Maybe he's impressed. Maybe he's amused. Or maybe he's already calculating how to respond in kind. Because if this is how the game begins, with gold and horses and perfume, then surely Egypt will find a way to outshine them all. The hall quiets as the last chest of jewels is carried away, and for a moment the air feels heavy, thick not with incense or treasure dust but with calculation. Because now comes the part that makes your skin prickle. This whole dance isn't only about affection or gifts. It's about power. When pharaohs leaned in to whisper across the borders, they weren't just flirting, they were practicing the art of survival. You sit with the courtiers as they unroll fresh papyrus, the reed pens poised like spears. A new letter must be crafted. Not one of those coy, playful notes about dowries and horses, but something sharper, something that balances Egypt's pride with just enough warmth to keep alliances alive. You feel the hush, the same kind of hush you hear before a judge bangs a gavel, or before a diplomat raises their glass at a summit. Words now are weapons, and every syllable is weighted like gold dust. The scribe clears his throat and begins to draft. To the great king of Babylon, my brother, my equal, may the gods bless you. The phrasing is deliberate. Egypt could have called itself superior, but here the pharaoh leans on the word brother. That single word is politics disguised as tenderness. It says we are equals. We will not invade each other, at least not this season. You can't help but grin, because if modern leaders wrote like this, half the headlines would sound like Valentine's Day cards. One of the advisors mutters that using brother is risky, it makes Egypt seem too soft. Another reminds him that Babylon controls vital trade routes. You watch them bicker, voices sharp as flint, and you realize this is the real flirting, not the princess's dowry or the chariot's shine, but the balancing act of phrasing affection just carefully enough to keep swords sheathed. And then the pharaoh speaks. His voice is calm, steady, but underneath there's an edge of iron. Write that Egypt's gold flows like the Nile. Write that our temples gleam brighter than the moon. Write that we honor his daughter, but not so much that he thinks we need her. The scribe's reed pen scratches, the symbols spilling out like bird tracks across the papyrus. You feel the tension coil in your chest. Every line is a performance, every compliment a mask. Here's something strange you catch from another corner. One advisor suggests slipping in a joke about our gods dancing with your gods. The pharaoh chuckles, then dismisses it. But the fact that it was even proposed tells you something. Humor, carefully placed, could diffuse suspicion. Historians still argue over whether any such playful lines survived into the final letters. Some believe the scribes edited them out. Others think the hints of levity we do find were intentional, little sparks of humanity smuggled past officialdom. Now, as the letter takes shape, you can't ignore the bigger picture. These marriages weren't about romance alone, they were scaffolding for empires. A princess stepping into Egypt was a treaty wrapped in silk. A dowry was a promise of peace disguised as jewelry. And the pharaoh, holding court beneath murals of Horus and Isis, wasn't just choosing a wife. He was choosing whether Babylon thrived or crumbled, whether the Hittites smiled or sharpened their spears. You walk out into the courtyard where diplomats pace, their sandals slapping against stone. They glance nervously at the palace doors, wondering how their gifts will be judged, whether their daughters will be accepted. You see their faces etched with worry, and you realize something humbling. In this game, everyone is vulnerable. Even kings, even gods on earth, feared rejection. And of course, there's a little comedy too. One anecdote tells of a Babylonian envoy who tried to impress by bringing exotic animals, only for the monkeys to escape and wreak havoc in the palace gardens. Imagine papyrus scrolls fluttering as courtiers chased shrieking monkeys up palm trees. You laugh under your breath, because in that chaos, all the grandeur of diplomacy collapses into slapstick. Even pharaohs, it seems, weren't safe from banana-related disasters. The night deepens, and the torches burn low. The finished letter lies on the table, rolled and sealed with the royal stamp. Tomorrow, it will begin its long journey, carried on camelback, then ship, then donkey cart, until it reaches a king far away who will squint at the words and try to read between the lines. Does Egypt truly desire his daughter, or only his loyalty? Does the affection glow like fire, or flicker like smoke? These questions ripple outward like circles in water, never fully answered, always debated. You stand in the doorway, gazing out at the Nile glimmering under moonlight. It flows endlessly, unconcerned with alliances or flirtations. But you, caught in the quiet of the palace, feel the weight of every word just written. Because here in Egypt, diplomacy isn't just parchment and seals. It's courtship disguised as strategy, and strategy disguised as courtship. And the pharaoh, seated above it all, knows that to master one is to master the other. The air in the palace is warm again, not from the torches this time, but from tension. You step into the council chamber just as a new letter is being unfolded, its clay surface gleaming faintly with baked sheen. A hush falls as the scribe clears his throat. The words he begins to read are not the honeyed lines of courtship, not the gentle brother to brother greetings. No, this one is sharper, like a reed pen scratching across stone. Tonight, for the first time, you hear what it sounds like when a princess, or more truthfully, her father, says, "No." The scribe's voice is steady. "My daughter is not to be sent. She is the jewel of our house, and she cannot be given away." The courtiers flinch. You almost laugh at the familiarity of it. This is the ancient equivalent of someone politely rejecting a proposal, except instead of a private text, it's an official communique baked into clay and hand-delivered across deserts. Imagine being friend-zoned in triplicate, with the entire diplomatic corps seat. You lean against a column and watch the pharaoh's face. He doesn't scowl, doesn't rage, he just narrows his eyes, the faintest muscle twitching at his jaw. Inside, you know he's simmering. Egypt never heard, no, lightly. When a foreign court refused to part with a princess, it wasn't just a matter of pride, it was a political earthquake. A rejection meant distrust, or worse, insult. The advisors are already muttering. Some call for trade sanctions, others for military drills along the frontier. But the pharaoh raises his hand, silencing them. "They fear us," he says softly, "and so they hide their daughters like birds in cages." His voice is calm, but there's an edge beneath, like flint scraping steel. And yet, sometimes the refusal wasn't hostile. Sometimes it was almost playful. One Babylonian king once wrote back, "Our daughters are too precious for the Nile's sun. They would wilt." It's basically a dad joke turned diplomatic shield, the ancient version of sorry, she's not allowed to date right now. You smirk, because you can picture the Pharaoh's flat stare when he read that line. Still, not all refusals ended in laughter. One particularly famous case lingers in the air tonight, the story of a Hittite princess who was promised. Negotiations stretched for months. Then suddenly her father changed course. He sent a terse reply. She will remain here. Egypt's envoys returned empty-handed, their caravans rattling through the desert without the bride they had prepared for. That single no festered for years, souring relations until swords clashed and blood stained the sands. Historians still argue whether the princess herself resisted, whether she wept and begged to stay, or whether she was simply a pawn moved by men too nervous to trust the pharaoh. The truth? It's lost, sealed away in silence. You wander closer to the dais, the cool stone chilling your bare feet. A courtier whispers in your ear. Sometimes, even after refusals, gifts were still exchanged. As if to say, we won't send our daughter, but please let's stay friends. A jar of wine here, a bolt of linen there. It's like returning an engagement ring but keeping the Netflix password, half a breakup, half a truce. The pharaoh eventually sighs, rubbing his temples. Write them back, he orders. Say we are disappointed, but Egypt endures. His words echo in the hall, but the bite underneath is unmistakable. You realize then that every no reshaped history as much as any yes. Rejections carved boundaries, forced new strategies, and sometimes even sparked wars. Still, the humor lingers too. One court gossip insists a Mitanni princess once refused Egypt not for politics, but because she heard Egyptians use crocodile dung in their cosmetics. You chuckle, it might be apocryphal, but you can imagine her wrinkling her nose, muttering, absolutely not. Whether true or not, the image is too good to forget. You step back, the weight of the chamber pressing down on your shoulders. The no still hangs in the air, a ghostly echo long after the scribe rolled up the reply. For you, it's clear, sometimes diplomacy sounded like courtship, sometimes like rejection, and often both at once. And each time a princess stayed home, the pharaoh's flirtations met their sharpest test. The torches gutter as a draft sweeps through the hall, the sound of papyrus rustling like a sigh. Outside, the Nile keeps flowing, indifferent to refusals or affections. But here inside you feel it, the sting of rejection, the careful mask of dignity, and the awareness that tomorrow, the game will begin again. The council chamber empties slowly, courtiers drifting away like shadows dissolving at dawn. But the tension of refusals still clings to the air, prickling against your skin. You step into another hall, quieter, cooler, and there you find a scribe poring over a tablet that looks older, darker than the rest. He looks up at you with a flicker of unease. This, he murmurs, is the story of the bride who never came. The words strike you differently. Up to now, refusals were sharp and clear, an official no, a sealed rejection. But this is worse. It's a story without an ending, a trail that simply vanishes into sand. The tale begins with promise. The pharaoh had written to a foreign king, some say of Mitanni, others swear it was Babylon, requesting his daughter. Negotiations stretched for months. Envoys traveled back and forth, weighed down with gifts, bolts of fine linen, jars of honey, amulets carved from ivory. The palace prepared as if for a festival. Servants scrubbed courtyards, chefs tested recipes with cinnamon and garlic, jewelers polished crowns that would glint like lightning in the marriage procession. You can almost hear the chatter, the giggles, the nervous planning. Egypt braced itself for the arrival of a new queen. And then, nothing. The day of her journey passed. Caravans rolled out from the foreign city, but no princess rode among them. The letters grew vague, excuses piling up like broken pottery. She is not ready. The omens were unkind. Perhaps next season. At first, the pharaoh waited patiently, convinced she would come. But as weeks stretched into months, patience thinned into silence. Here's the strangest part. Some records hint she may have actually set out. There are lines, half broken, difficult to read, that suggest the caravan was attacked on the road. Bandits? Rival soldiers? A sandstorm that swallowed everything? No one knows. Historians still debate whether she vanished in the desert or never left her homeland at all. You picture it, a young woman, wrapped in linen, perched in a carriage with gold fittings, her future shimmering like a mirage, only to fade before reaching the Nile. The pharaoh's court was left embarrassed, murmurs crawling like ants through the palace halls. Was she taken hostage? Was her father lying? Did the gods themselves intervene? No one dared ask too loudly, but the uncertainty gnawed at everyone. And of course, the gossips had their own spin. One servant whispered that the princess had fallen in love with a stable boy and refused to leave. Another claimed she ran away in the night, preferring freedom over a gilded cage in a foreign land. And one wag, smirking over his cup of beer, muttered that maybe she just heard about crocodile dung sunscreen and decided to pass. You chuckle at that. It's crude, but even in history, rumor and humor twine together like reeds along the riverbank. The absence of this bride had consequences. A broken promise wasn't just a disappointment, it was a crack in the edifice of trust. The pharaoh's advisors urged him to retaliate, to cut off trade, to send soldiers to remind the foreign king of his obligations. But the pharaoh, whether out of dignity or exhaustion, let the matter slip. He never married that princess. The story ends not with a wedding procession, but with silence. You feel the weight of it as you pace the hall. Rejections sting, yes, but at least they close a door. This was different. This was an open wound, a half-finished sentence that left Egypt blinking into the desert haze, wondering what had been lost. And centuries later, you're still here, scratching at the mystery, trying to decide, was she real, was she phantom, or was she just a bargaining chip that evaporated into smoke? You step back into the courtyard, where the night breeze cools your skin. The stars burn hard above, indifferent to broken engagements. The Nile whispers softly in the distance, steady, eternal. But the tale of the bride who never came lingers in your ears, like a lullaby cut short before the final note. And in that silence you realize, sometimes the greatest drama in history isn't in the wars fought, or the treasures traded, but in the promises that vanish without explanation, leaving everyone to wonder forever. The silence of broken promises fades as you step into another part of the palace, this time alive with sound. The heavy hush of missing brides is replaced by a swell of music, laughter, and the unmistakable scent of roasting goose. Tonight, the halls are not echo chambers of letters and refusals. Tonight, they pulse with celebration. A royal wedding has begun, and you're invited to wander through the chaos. You enter the courtyard first, where torchlight flickers against banners dyed in reds and blues, the colors of Upper and Lower Egypt. Priests parade past carrying lotus blossoms, their chants low and rhythmic, rising and falling like waves on the Nile. Drummers pound at hides stretched over carved wooden frames, each thumb vibrating in your chest like a second heartbeat. Harpists pluck melodies that swirl around the night air, weaving with the chants until you feel as though the whole city is humming one enormous hymn. The bride arrives not quietly but with spectacle. She's carried in a litter draped with linen embroidered in gold thread, her veil perfumed with frankincense and cinnamon oil. You catch the shimmer of her jewelry, bracelets stacked so high they clink like wind chimes, a heavy collar of turquoise and carnelian that gleams even in the torchlight. The crowd murmurs, children stand on tiptoe, and you can almost hear the whisper ripple, "She has come, she is here." And then comes the food. Oh, the food! Long tables groan under the weight of loaves shaped like crocodiles, honey cakes dripping amber, figs split open and stuffed with nuts. Jugs of beer and jars of wine pass from hand to hand until the laughter grows louder, cheeks flush, and you're reminded of modern wedding buffets. Except here, the danger isn't overeating, it's accidentally biting into goose liver soaked in coriander and thinking it's dessert. You wrinkle your nose at the mixture of smells, savory, sweet, smoky. It's overwhelming but intoxicating. Somewhere in the garden, dancers whirl, their linen skirts spinning like petals. They balance jars of water on their heads, arms swaying with impossible grace. The guests clap and cheer, and you find yourself swaying too, half entranced by the rhythm, half amused at how this is both a sacred ritual and the Bronze Age version of party entertainment. Imagine booking a DJ today, except instead you hire 3 acrobats and a troupe of women balancing flaming bowls. The pharaoh watches from his throne, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He's dressed not in battle regalia but in wedding finery, a kilt woven with gold thread, a crown circled with flowers instead of cobras. He looks younger tonight, less like a god and more like a man savoring the spectacle. You wonder if he's relieved, after letters and negotiations, refusals and vanishing brides. Finally, here is a wedding that actually happened. And of course, the gossip flows faster than the wine. One courtier leans in to whisper about how many dowries were exchanged. Another snickers that the groom looks more nervous than the bride. You overhear a joke about how the pharaoh must be careful not to trip over his collar. It's so wide it could double as a dinner tray. You laugh quietly with them. Even in the grandest of moments, humor keeps the nerves at bay. Here's a little-known fact that makes you pause. Some Egyptian weddings lasted not just one night but a full week. Day after day of feasts, processions, offerings, and performances. The city itself would seem to vibrate with celebration, like an endless festival that blurred lines between sacred and secular. Imagine being a guest. You'd have to pace yourself, knowing you had 6 more nights of eating, drinking, and pretending to enjoy your neighbor's endless stories about his papyrus farm. Historians still debate the details of these weddings. Were they primarily religious rituals, binding 2 families in the eyes of the gods, or were they more civic pageants, designed to show off power and wealth? The truth is probably both. Sacred vows and political theater mingled together until no one could tell them apart. But standing here, surrounded by laughter and torchlight, you can't help thinking the people simply wanted to celebrate, to forget for a little while the weight of empires and soak in joy. As the night stretches on, you tilt your head back and watch sparks drift up into the star-freckled sky. The music softens, guests sink into cushions, and servants bring out the final trays of dates and almonds. Somewhere, the pharaoh and his new bride retreat into chambers scented with lotus and myrrh, where whispered words will seal what the feasts have only begun. And you, still sitting in the courtyard with crumbs of honey cake on your lips, realize that for all its grandeur, a royal wedding is not so different from any other. Nerves, laughter, awkward jokes, too much food, too much drink. It's humanity wrapped in gold leaf, dressed in ceremony, but still humanity. The party hums, the Nile flows, and you drift with it, lulled by the rhythm of drums fading slowly into the dark. The music fades as the last torches gutter in the courtyard, and you follow the quiet shuffle of sandals into the dim corridors of the palace. The air grows thicker here, heavy with myrrh and the faint sweetness of lotus oil. No laughter, no drums, no clapping. Just the hush of silk brushing against stone and whispers that seem to vanish the moment you hear them. You've wandered into the private world behind the marriage feast, the secret chambers where history hints at something softer, stranger, and sometimes more scandalous, the royal bedroom. Here, the flirtations carved in clay and shouted in banquets are replaced with subtler tools. On low tables you see jars of unguents, glistening in the lamplight. Some are perfumed with blue lotus, believed to stir desire and calm nerves at once. Others reek faintly of garlic and resin, mixtures so pungent you instinctively recoil, but the Egyptians swore they carried power. Imagine presenting your new bride with a jar of sticky, garlic-scented ointment and saying, "Trust me, this will work wonders." It's not exactly the stuff of modern romance, yet it mattered deeply here. You glance at a small basket tucked in the corner. Inside are dried herbs, roots bound in linen cords, little packets of powdered minerals. These were the aphrodisiacs of the day, part medicine, part magic, part placebo. Some are harmless, others questionable. One recipe whispers of crocodile hearts ground with honey. Another mentions mandrake fruits, whose odd, human-like shape gave them a reputation as love charms. You grin, because you know how people can be. Even now folks Google secret tips for romance. Nothing has changed, just the ingredients. And then there are the amulets. Tiny faience beads shaped like Hathor, goddess of love and music. Scarabs etched with words of fertility. One particularly delicate charm shows a pair of geese facing each other, wings nearly touching, a small, clay whisper of intimacy. These tokens would have been placed under pillows, tied around wrists, or hidden in bedding. Were they powerful? Historians still debate it. Some say the Egyptians believed wholeheartedly in their magic, others suggest it was more about the comfort of ritual, a way to calm nerves before stepping into the unknown. You hear soft laughter now, muffled by walls but unmistakable. For all the solemnity, these chambers weren't grim. Newlyweds teased each other, courtiers gossiped about who blushed first, who tripped over a linen sheet. One old papyrus even records a playful exchange where a wife jokes that her husband snores like Seth's thunder. You chuckle. Imagine a queen daring to compare her god-king husband to a thunderous boar in bed. It's as human as any couple bantering before sleep. The air grows warmer the deeper you wander. You brush against a curtain of beaded shells, their clinking like soft rain. Behind it lies a chamber with murals that shimmer faintly in lamplight. Hathor playing her sistrum, Best the dwarf god grinning mischievously, protective and body all at once. The walls themselves seemed to hum with a reminder. Love and fertility weren't private matters only. They were cosmic duties. To join together was to echo the gods themselves, to ensure the land's prosperity. And yet, tucked between ritual and responsibility, there were secret tricks. Recipes written in hurried hands, folded and hidden. Grind dates with wine, stir with honey, drink before the moon rises. Some, no doubt, were invented by hopeful servants who wanted extra coin. Others may have worked only because people believed they would. You smile at the thought, half science, half superstition, but all wrapped in the same anxious hope that passion would spark when most needed. Still, a shadow lingers. Not every union bloomed. Some letters hint at disappointment, brides who never settled, pharaohs who grew cold, marriages that were loveless despite all the perfumes and charms. Historians argue whether these unions were ever meant to be intimate at all, or whether the chamber was merely another stage for politics. The truth, perhaps, lies somewhere in between. A marriage could be both treaty and tenderness, both strategy and solace. As you sit by the faintly glowing oil lamp, you catch the scent of lotus once more. It's cloying, heady, but oddly soothing. You imagine the hush of the room when the torches die, the weight of linen sheets, the uncertain breath of two people bound not just by desire, but by nations. And in that silence you realize, the true secret of the royal bedchamber was not the jars of oils or the carved amulets. It was the fragile attempt to find connection under the crushing weight of empire. You stand slowly, the beads clinking again as you slip back into the hall. Behind you, the chamber grows quiet, the perfumes thick, the whispers fading. Ahead, the palace waits for dawn, when politics will roar back to life and the memory of the night will become just another secret folded into history. The dawn creeps in over the Nile, gilding the palace rooftops with a thin sheet of gold. The feasts have ended, the perfumes of last night still cling faintly to the walls, but the mood is quieter now, more solemn, more enduring. Because the real story doesn't end in the bedchamber. You follow the winding corridors to the audience hall, where sunlight cuts through high windows and falls directly upon the throne. Here is where foreign brides cease to be brides and begin their lives as queens of Egypt. You see her enter, the new consort from Babylon, or Mitanni, or Hutti, her name barely recorded in the surviving fragments. She walks with measured steps, linen shimmering like woven starlight, her foreign accent curling through her Egyptian vows. The court watches closely. Some whisper approval, others suspicion. To them, she is both treasure and threat. Egypt prided itself on absorbing the world, but that didn't mean it trusted outsiders easily. Her crown gleams with turquoise insets, and when she sits beside the pharaoh, the message is clear: this is no visiting princess. She is a queen now, mother of potential heirs, bridge between nations. The people bow. Musicians strike their harps in solemn chords. And you can feel it. Egypt has stretched a little further, its arms wrapped around a new ally, its heart just slightly altered. Yet beneath the pomp lies unease. You overhear a priest muttering that a queen from abroad might worship unfamiliar gods. Will she honor Ra and Osiris as devoutly as her Egyptian sisters? Will she bow to Hathor, goddess of love, or still pray to her homeland's deities in secret? Some historians argue that foreign queens introduced new cults and rituals into Egypt, weaving Babylonian and Hittite traditions into Nile life. Others insist their influence was limited, carefully fenced by the priesthood. The debate lingers, like smoke refusing to clear. One story stands out in particular: the Mitanni princess Gulukapa, who arrived in Egypt with not just herself but a full entourage of ladies-in-waiting. Records say hundreds of attendants marched into Thebes with her, a small army of foreign women suddenly woven into Egyptian society. You picture the stir it must have caused: new fashions of hair, new accents echoing in palace halls, gossip and unfamiliar tongues. For the Egyptians, it was dazzling and unsettling all at once, like watching a foreign movie without subtitles. And then there is the case of Tadukapa, another Mitanni princess, who may have married not one but two pharaohs, first Amenhotep III, then his son Akhenaten. Some suggest she became the famous Queen Kia. Others argue her identity was swallowed by the shifting sands of Akhenaten's radical reign. You linger on that mystery, a young woman sent far from home, reshaped by history, her name blurred yet her presence undeniable. Did she whisper in Akhenaten's ear about her foreign gods, nudging him toward his obsession with the sun disk Aten? Scholars debated still, their voices echoing through libraries as if chasing her shadow. And of course, gossip never dies. The Egyptian elite sometimes grumbled that foreign queens had too much sway. One bitter tablet complains that the women speak with silver tongues, and the king listens. You laugh softly, because it sounds like an ancient in-law complaining about the daughter-in-law's influence at family dinners. Even 3,000 years ago, someone was muttering about who had the king's ear. But it wasn't all suspicion. There are hints, rare, fleeting, that some of these foreign queens were genuinely loved. A few scarabs bear their names paired with the pharaohs, inscriptions that seem more tender than political. In one stela fragment, a queen is described as beloved of the king, radiant of face. Was it flattery, or truth? No one can say for sure. Yet the possibility lingers, like a soft perfume still clinging to a chamber long after its lamp has gone dark. You drift closer to the throne, the sound of sandals shuffling on stone filling your ears. The queen sits straight-backed, her foreign jewels glinting in the Egyptian light. Children of courtiers peer from behind pillars, curious about her accent, her dress, her strange hairpins shaped like flowers they've never seen. In that moment, she is no longer just one woman, she is the embodiment of her homeland, a living treaty sealed not with ink but with breath and heartbeat. And still, you sense the irony? Pharaohs took in foreign brides, but they never sent their own daughters away. The rule remained, rigid as stone. So Egypt absorbed others but gave nothing back. The queens from abroad could rise high, sit beside kings, even influence policy. But they could never erase the knowledge that they had been given, while no Egyptian princess ever was. The balance of power tilted quietly, yet unmistakably, toward the Nile. As the sun climbs higher, the hall shimmers with heat. Priests chant blessings, courtiers bow, and you feel the pulse of empire thrum beneath your feet. Another foreign queen has been crowned. Another thread has been pulled into Egypt's vast tapestry. And in that moment you realize, the throne was not just for kings. It was for the women who crossed deserts and seas, who left behind their homelands and stepped into eternity as queens of the Nile. The hall still hums with the presence of foreign queens, their jewels catching the light like fragments of captured dawn. But as you step deeper into the palace, you begin to sense another current beneath the perfume and ceremony. These marriages are not just about crowns and veils, not only about veiled flirtations and foreign perfumes. They are about survival. And sometimes, when the world teetered, when armies massed and treaties wavered, a royal marriage became the last, fragile thread holding peace together. This is the moment when love, or the performance of it, transformed into politics. You walk into the strategy chamber, where maps of the known world are sprawled across a table carved from cedar. Lines are drawn with charcoal, the Hittites to the north, Babylon to the east, Mitanni fading, Assyria rising like a storm. Around the table, advisors argue in sharp voices. Some clamor for war, others for trade, and in the middle stands the pharaoh, his hand resting on a scroll that contains not a battle plan, but a marriage contract. It is here you realize the truth. Sometimes the difference between bloodshed and alliance was not an army, but a bride. One case the scribes whisper about is the proposed marriage between Egypt and the Hittites during the reign of Ramesses II. The two powers had clashed brutally at the Battle of Kadesh, chariots thundering, thousands slain, dust and blood choking the air. Yet after years of stalemate, peace came not with more spears, but with a treaty sealed by the marriage of a Hittite princess to the Egyptian king. Imagine it, After decades of war, the path to peace ran through a wedding chamber. The princess's veil was as powerful as a shield, her dowry as decisive as an army. The details of that union still sparkle oddly through history. Some accounts say the Hittite princess was received with unusual honor, paraded through Thebes with festivals that lasted weeks. Others claim Ramesses treated her kindly, calling her his great royal wife, alongside Nefertari. Whether affection blossomed or not, the political result was clear. Egypt's northern border quieted, caravans resumed, and the once bloody frontier became a corridor of trade. You lean over the map, tracing a finger along those routes. Grain moving north, silver and iron moving south. Horses exchanged for gold. And all of it balanced on a single pair of hands, delicate hands perhaps, of a princess who likely hadn't chosen this fate for herself. It's sobering, isn't it? To think of a young woman's wedding night as the hinge of empires. But not every political marriage was so successful. Another tale whispers of a Babylonian king who, after offering his daughter, demanded gold in return, so much gold that Egypt nearly balked. The negotiations dragged on, tempers flared, and though the bride arrived, the alliance fractured within years. Instead of building bridges, the marriage only stoked resentment. You shake your head. It's like those modern corporate mergers that promise harmony but collapse under ego and greed. And then, of course, there is the human element. You catch a stray line in one letter. The king looks upon his bride with delight, and the land prospers. Was it propaganda, or was it genuine? Did some pharaohs actually fall for their foreign wives, beyond the treaty, beyond the politics? Historians still debate it fiercely. Some argue love could never survive under such weight. Others say it occasionally broke through, surprising everyone, like lotus blooming from mud. The chamber grows hotter as the sun climbs, and the advisors' voices drone on. You hear one laugh dryly. Marriage is cheaper than war. The others chuckle, but you sense the bitterness under it. Because they know that behind every treaty bride stands the possibility of betrayal. What if her father changes sides tomorrow? What if her brothers sharpen swords even as she pours wine for her husband? Trust and suspicion intertwine, making the bedchamber a battlefield of its own. And yet, there is something almost touching in the image of two empires trying to stitch themselves together with silk instead of steel. The courtiers may roll their eyes, the scribes may sigh over endless letters, but when a princess steps into Egypt, wearing both her homeland's jewels and Egypt's diadem, she becomes a living peace treaty. And sometimes, perhaps, she becomes something more. As evening falls, you step out into the balcony overlooking the Nile. The river glows copper in the dying light, fishermen casting nets that sparkle like spider silk. Behind you, the pharaoh signs another letter, sealing another alliance. Ahead of you, the river keeps flowing, ancient and indifferent. You breathe deeply, and you realize that in this world, politics and love were never separate. They were threads of the same tapestry, woven tight, impossible to pull apart without unraveling the whole cloth. So you stand quietly, the air warm on your skin, and you let the truth sink in. Sometimes a marriage could stop a war. Sometimes it could ignite one. And sometimes, against all odds, it could do both at once. The maps are rolled up, the advisors dismissed, and the chamber sinks into a silence broken only by the soft hiss of lamps. You follow a narrow corridor until you reach a smaller room, cluttered not with treasures or charts, but with clay. Shelves sag beneath the weight of tablets, each one a heavy rectangle scarred with wedge-shaped lines. Here is where the past whispers more softly. These aren't just treaties or demands for gold. These are scraps of longing, scattered letters that somehow survived. And tonight you lean in close, listening to the love notes of an empire. The scribe handling them is an old man, his fingers ink-stained, his eyes cloudy. He runs a hand reverently across the surface of one tablet, tracing the grooves like someone might touch a scar. This one, he mutters, was found cracked, yet the words are still clear. He begins to read, and the sound is halting but warm. My sister, my beloved, I wait for you. The nights are long, the wine bitter, the music hollow until you arrive. The word sister makes you blink, but you quickly learn it's not literal, it's a term of endearment, a way to claim intimacy. You smile faintly, because it's no different from someone today calling their partner, honey, or love, even if the phrasing sounds strange to outsiders. You wander deeper among the shelves, pulling down another tablet. This one is smaller, almost pocket-sized. The writing is rushed, uneven, like someone scribbling before a messenger snatched it away. Send me news of her, it pleads, for the road is long and the weight heavier than stone. You picture a foreign prince writing from his palace, desperate to know if his daughter, now in Egypt, was treated kindly. His worry is palpable, the clay itself almost warm with it. It strikes you, even kings, even pharaohs, were someone's children, someone's loved ones, missed across deserts. One tablet makes you laugh. It's a note that seems to combine diplomacy with awkward humor. We hear your princess is as radiant as the sun. We pray she does not outshine the crops. You can imagine the scribe pausing mid-carve, shaking his head at the clumsy compliment. But the sentiment is still there, sweet in its fumbling way, as if a dad joke somehow slipped into a royal archive. Still, the intimacy isn't always clumsy. A fragment records a pharaoh himself. Some scholars believe it was Amenhotep III, writing about his bride's absence. The moon rises, and I see her face. The river runs, and I hear her voice. Yet she is not here. The words are simple, but you feel them ache in your chest. Historians argue whether these were genuine feelings or just poetic flourishes, the ancient version of PR. But reading them now, you can't help but believe at least a spark of truth burned behind those lines. The smell of clay dust clings to your nose as you crouch lower, picking through broken pieces. On one shard, barely legible, are words that make you pause. Do not delay. My heart grows tired. The voice could belong to a king, a queen, a prince, it doesn't matter. What matters is the universality of it. Across centuries, across scripts and symbols, someone grew weary of waiting, just as people still do today when their messages go unanswered. And here comes the curious part. Not all of these letters were meant for lovers. Some were between fathers and daughters, mothers and sons, kings and brothers-in-law. Yet even in their stiff exchanges, you catch glimmers of affection. A father asking if his daughter eats well. A brother boasting of his sister's beauty. In the midst of politics, these tiny phrases shine like hidden gems. One historian's note comes to mind. He argued that these letters were half business, half heartbeat. You can see why. The business part is obvious: gold, dowries, alliances. But the heartbeat sneaks in, refusing to be silenced. And that's what makes these fragments so compelling. They remind you that behind the grandeur of the palace, behind the gilded crowns and towering statues, there were real people missing each other, worrying, teasing, longing. You step back and let the old scribe replace the tablets carefully on their shelves. The room feels warmer now, as if the letters themselves radiate the heat of the emotions trapped inside. You close your eyes, and for a moment you can almost hear it, The sound of a pharaoh dictating a line with a sigh, a scribe scratching hurriedly, a messenger tucking the tablet under his arm before vanishing into the desert night. When you open your eyes, the room is still. The shelves sag, the lamps flicker, and the words remain, carved forever into clay. They outlasted kingdoms, wars, even the walls of palaces. And here you stand listening. The echo of longing is faint, but it's there, as steady as the Nile. The chamber of letters fades into shadow as you wander back into the brighter halls. But tonight you don't find treaties or whispered longing, you stumble into something lighter, almost mischievous. Because for all their godlike grandeur, pharaohs were still men. And when it came to romance, even kings of Egypt had their clumsy moments, their awkward lines, their well-intentioned jokes that landed with all the grace of a donkey in a lotus pond. You hear laughter before you see it. Courtiers gathered near a colonnade are snickering behind their hands while a young scribe recites from a papyrus scroll. His voice is mocking but affectionate, as if retelling an inside joke everyone knows. The king, upon greeting the princess, compared her eyes to the dark waters of the Nile at flood. Then, as silence fell, he added, "And her hair to the tail of my finest ox." The group erupts into chuckles. You can't help but laugh too. You imagine the princess smiling politely, thinking, really? Oxtail hair? Even 3,000 years ago, kings were capable of pick-up lines that should have stayed buried in the sand. Another scribe adds his own tale. During one banquet, a pharaoh tried to impress a foreign bride by balancing a gold goblet on his head while dancing. The goblet fell, clattering across the floor, splashing wine onto the sandals of a visiting ambassador. You picture it vividly, the god-king of Egypt stooping to pick up a goblet like a sheepish schoolboy, and the court politely applauding as if nothing had happened. There's a warmth in these stories. They strip away the marble and the divine titles, leaving someone painfully human. One anecdote even claims a pharaoh once sent a letter praising a princess's beauty, but accidentally addressed it to her aunt instead. The correction letter survives in fragments, with the pharaoh insisting it was a scribal error. You smirk at that. Sure, blame the scribe. That excuse is at least 3,000 years old. The whispers continue. Another joke. When one foreign bride complained of the Egyptian heat, the pharaoh gallantly promised to command the sun to ease. Of course, the sun blazed hotter the next day, and the courtiers never let him forget it. You shake your head. It's the ancient equivalent of bragging about fixing the Wi-Fi and then watching it crash 5 minutes later. And yet, mixed in with the laughter, you sense affection. These weren't cruel stories meant to belittle the king. They were the kinds of jokes people tell about a friend at a wedding toast, embarrassing, yes, but cherished. They reminded the court that even the mightiest ruler had to stumble through the awkwardness of attraction. Historians, of course, still argue whether these anecdotes were true. Some claim they were propaganda, meant to soften the pharaoh's image, to make him relatable to his people. Others believe they were gossip exaggerated across generations. But the truth almost doesn't matter. What matters is that the image of the pharaoh wasn't only carved in stone with perfect posture and eternal youth. Somewhere in the laughter of his court, he was remembered as the man who tried too hard, who cracked bad jokes, who maybe spilled his wine when he leaned in too close. You picture it now, the grand throne room, painted columns towering overhead, and in the middle of it, a king fumbling through a compliment, a princess raising her eyebrow, and the courtiers biting their lips to hold in giggles. It's oddly comforting. Because it tells you something eternal, that even gods on earth weren't immune to the clumsy side of love. As you drift away from the colonnade, the laughter lingers in your ears, light and soothing. For once, the palace doesn't feel heavy with politics or burdened with omens. It feels almost like a living room filled with family, teasing and chuckling late into the night. And in that sound, you hear a different kind of history, not carved into monuments or captured in treaties, but tucked into laughter that somehow slipped through time. The laughter of the courtiers drifts away as you walk down a quieter passage. The air here feels different, cooler, more intellectual, as if even the stone walls are leaning in to listen. You arrive in a chamber where no music plays, no perfumes linger, only shelves of scrolls and fragments. Scribes and scholars sit cross-legged on mats, whispering and arguing. This is not the palace of feasts or the bedroom of perfumes. This is the echo chamber of history itself, where questions linger like gnats in the evening air. You slip closer, and the first voice rises. These marriages were political, nothing more. Pharaohs sought alliances, not affection. Every gift, every bride, every feast was a transaction dressed in gold. He pounds his fist lightly on a wooden box of tablets, the sound echoing like a gavel. Another scholar leans forward, eyes gleaming. And yet, look at the words carved into clay. Look at the scarabs bearing both names. Do you not hear it? Longing, tenderness, even humor. Why would kings waste time with poetry if there was no spark of truth? His voice softens, and you catch the faintest smile. Even pharaohs were human. They wanted more than treaties. The debate bounces back and forth. One insists that pharaohs treated their foreign queens like pawns, their lives mere footnotes in a grander scheme. Another retorts that pawns don't leave behind love poems, nor earn pet names whispered in murals. Someone quotes the Mitanni correspondence, others cite the fragments of stele. You realize quickly that history has left them breadcrumbs but no feast, hints without answers. You linger on one fragment yourself. A pharaoh writes of gazing at the moon and thinking of his absent bride. Was it a true sign in the night, or the work of a clever scribe polishing royal image? Historians still argue, their voices blending with the hiss of torches. You can't help but chuckle. People today still fight online about whether a celebrity couple is real or just PR. Some debates never change, only the stage does. Another scholar raises a different point. Consider the queens themselves. Do we mistake silence for compliance? They may have wielded power, shaped policy, whispered counsel into ears. Perhaps their marriages were not only about survival but influence. He gestures toward a mural showing a foreign queen alongside Hathor, her hand almost equal in size to the king's, a subtle but telling detail. Was that symbolism, or a memory of her true authority? Of course, not everyone agrees. A stern voice cuts through. Romance is a fantasy. These were alliances. The women were chosen for fertility, dowry, and treaty value. Do not make them Juliet when they were pawns of Caesar. His words slice like obsidian, hard and dismissive. The chamber falls into murmurs, head shaking, pens scratching. And you realize, the debate will never end. The truth is a mosaic with missing tiles. Some see love, some see calculation, and both might be right. Still, you find yourself leaning toward the idea that something genuine sometimes slipped through. After all, people are people. Even under crowns, even in gilded cages, they laugh, they long, they make mistakes. Why should pharaohs be exceptions? Why should queens not find tenderness amid duty? You don't say it aloud, but the thought lingers as you watch the scholars scribble more notes, their arguments weaving into the air like smoke. And then comes a story that silences the room. One old papyrus suggests a foreign queen once wrote privately to her sister back home, saying simply, "I am well. He is kind." No poetry, no politics. Just 2 sentences. Was it truth? Was it survival, written under watchful eyes? No one knows. But the simplicity of it sends a hush across the room, heavier than any debate. The lamps flicker, shadows crawl along the walls, and the voices rise again, circling endlessly. Were these marriages cold contracts, or warm unions? Were pharaohs strategic, or sentimental? The answers vanish into the centuries, stubbornly out of reach. And you realize this is part of the story too. The not knowing, the endless discussion, the way history teases you with fragments and dares you to choose your own conclusion. As you step back out into the corridor, the echoes follow you. The scholars are still talking, their words bouncing off stone, their arguments destined never to end. And you smile faintly, because perhaps that's the truest legacy of these royal flirtations. They left behind not certainties, but questions, still alive, still buzzing, thousands of years later. The chamber of scholars fades behind you, their voices still buzzing like cicadas at dusk. You wander into another wing of the palace where the air feels heavier, tinged not with incense but with something sour, like the aftertaste of wine left too long in the jar. Here the walls are quieter, the torches dimmer, and you sense you're entering the darker chapters of these royal unions. Because not every flirtation ended with laughter, not every treaty sealed with a kiss held strong. Tonight you linger among the broken promises, the marriages that slipped from silk into sand. One tale comes swiftly, whispered by a servant polishing bronze. He tells of a Babylonian princess married into Egypt, celebrated with festivals and crowned beside the pharaoh. But within months the letters from her father complained. She writes she is not honored. She is not treated as queen. The tablet survives, carved in a hand tight with frustration. Imagine it, thousands of miles away, a king raging because his daughter's letters home read like laments. Historians still debate if the pharaoh truly mistreated her, or if homesickness bled into her words. Either way, the alliance soured. What began with laughter at feasts dissolved into angry clay messages and silent corridors. Another story bites sharper. After Amenhotep III's death, his widow, the formidable Queen Tai, allegedly wrote to the Hittite king, pleading for one of his sons to marry her and rule Egypt beside her. The request was unprecedented, scandalous, an Egyptian queen asking for a foreign prince. The Hittite king agreed, sending his son across the border. But the prince never arrived. Somewhere near the frontier, he was ambushed and killed, whether by rival Egyptians who feared foreign influence, or by assassins dispatched in secret. No one knows. The marriage never happened, the treaty collapsed, and instead of peace, war ignited between Egypt and the Hittites. You shiver as you picture it. A royal union that could have united two empires instead became the spark of slaughter. The walls seem to lean closer as you walk, their painted gods frowning in shadow. You think of another fragment, less famous, but equally chilling. A princess promised to Egypt never arrived. Her caravan vanished, her name erased. Some say she died of illness, others that her father rescinded the deal. But one eerie line from an Egyptian envoy's report lingers. We waited by the river, but she did not come. That emptiness speaks louder than any war trumpet. Sometimes, a broken promise is louder than a battle. And then there's betrayal from within. One papyrus hints at a queen, foreign-born, who turned her loyalties back toward her homeland. She whispered to envoys, passed messages under the veil of festival dances, perhaps even plotted against her pharaoh husband. The records are vague, full of gaps, but the accusation alone was enough to stain her memory. Was it true, or court slander? Historians argue still. But whether real or rumor, her name slid into oblivion, erased from monuments, her story sealed beneath layers of suspicion. Even when betrayal wasn't deliberate, marriages often collapsed under pressure. Imagine a princess from Mitanni or Babylon, plucked from her gardens, shipped across deserts, and thrust into the blinding weight of Egyptian ritual. Some adjusted, some thrived. Others must have wilted. Their voices are gone, their laughter erased, but their silence whispers loudly in these halls. Of course, the courtiers still joked, even in the midst of bitterness. You overhear a servant mutter about a pharaoh who pouted for weeks after a dowry failed to arrive, sulking like a child denied his sweets. Our great lord, the servant snickered, throws tantrums fit for the nursery. You laugh under your breath. It's a reminder that even in tragedy, sarcasm survives. But the deeper truth presses on you. For every marriage that cemented peace, another fractured into tension or treachery. These unions were fragile threads stretched between empires. Sometimes they held. Sometimes they snapped. And when they snapped, the noise echoed across deserts, rattling borders, plunging kingdoms back into war. You step into a quiet courtyard, the moonlight painting silver across the tiles. The Nile murmurs faintly in the distance, eternal, unbothered by broken vows. You close your eyes and picture the faces of those forgotten queens, their hopes, their disappointments, their fear when promises crumbled. Their stories are not carved on obelisks, but they live in whispers, fragments, and silences. And standing there, you realize, history isn't just built on victories or treaties. It's built just as much on what failed, what faltered, what never came to pass. The broken promises haunt the palace as much as the triumphs. The night grows still. You take a slow breath, the air cool and heavy, and step back into shadow. The laughter of Section 12 feels far away now. What lingers here is quieter, heavier, the ache of vows undone, the echo of voices lost to time. The corridors are almost empty now. The drums of the feasts, the whispers of lovers, the scribes' endless scratching, all of it has faded. You find yourself alone in a hall where moonlight slants through narrow windows, falling across stone like pale silk. The air is cooler, softer, the perfumes of past nights lingering only faintly. You slow your steps. Tonight's journey has been long, winding from flirtations to feasts, from awkward jokes to broken vows. And here, at the quiet edge of the palace, the story begins to dim like a lantern running out of oil. You step outside, and the Nile lies stretched before you, silver under the stars. The water moves with steady rhythm, whispering the same lullaby it has sung for thousands of years. On the far bank, the silhouettes of pyramids rise, dark and eternal. Their shapes are sharp at first, then blur as your eyes grow heavier. These great stones have outlived every pharaoh, every princess, every marriage promise made and broken. Yet if you listen closely, you could almost believe the pyramids themselves are humming, a slow, low murmur, like a song meant only for the drowsy. You lean against a column, feeling the cool grit of stone beneath your palm. The air smells faintly of dust and lotus, a combination both dry and sweet. In the distance, a night bird calls, its voice drawn out and languid, echoing across the water. It blends with the breeze, with the shuffle of palm leaves, until the whole landscape seems to breathe with you, long, slow, steady. The stories you've wandered through, golden gifts, clay letters, vanished brides, awkward jokes, begin to drift like smoke. You can almost see them, each tale dissolving into the night sky, rising like sparks from a fire. They blur together until it's hard to remember which were treaties, which were romances, which were merely gossip. What remains is only the feeling, the sense that even beneath crowns, people reached out for love, stumbled into laughter, or endured heartbreak. That, more than the monuments, is what lingers. The pyramids loom larger as you close your eyes halfway. Their angles soften, becoming less like stone and more like mountains of memory. The stories nestle into them, layer by layer, until the voices of kings and queens are muffled into silence. They rest there, in chambers deep below the desert, where time slows and dreams wait. Your breath deepens, heavy with the weight of history but soothed by the rhythm of the Nile. You imagine the torches flickering one last time, then sinking into darkness. You imagine the courtiers' laughter fading to murmurs, then to silence. You imagine the pharaoh himself, finally laying aside his crown, closing his eyes, and becoming only a man again. The air is so still now that even the stars seem drowsy, their light dimming as though they too want to sleep. And as the palace grows quieter, as the night grows gentler, you feel yourself carried with it, drifting, not in a boat on the Nile, but in something slower, softer. A tide of sleep. And so, in the hush of pyramids, in the lull of desert wind, in the whisper of old letters and faded promises, you let yourself sink. The world of pharaohs, of princesses, of flirtations and treaties, slips away into a blur. Only the hum remains. Only the calm. Only the endless lullaby of the Nile. End of script. Sweet dreams.